I mean, yeah, of course, the Trudeau kneeling down thing for George Floyd, but that entire thing, similar to other instances where that happened, where cops kneeled. There's a great video explaining how the kneel thing was like a mode of pacifying a movement. And Trudeau, because that's what the fucking liberals are, they have a monopoly on, social causes. They have a monopoly on all of these different social causes that are associated with the quote unquote left. They have their hands in through the NGOification of politics, of grassroots politics. They, in so many of the quote unquote anti-fascist movement throughout the times of the convoy, so much of that was set up by quote unquote anti-hate research groups that were funded by the fucking Liberal Party of Canada. And then all of a sudden those people are also, guess what, pro-Zionist. And that's what they do. The best way to control the opposition is to lead it. And so they have all of these NGOs that are like on the fringe of left, that are just liberal NGOs, that are cutouts for the Liberal Party, then make it so that every social cause that is out there, you become associated with the NGO that has the most resources, and then they become the dominant voice for that cause. And it controls and manages the situation politically. You're able to alleviate the stress, alleviate the tension on your terms, rather than the people being the ones to dictate. I found the video that I was searching for. Very much worth talking about this and then putting it in the context of Trudeau.
I'm going to show you a video of Keke Palmer during the 2020 George Floyd uprisings. But before I do, pay attention to what happens. Pay attention to what happens around Keke Palmer and why. I'm going to let it play in full.
It was send a huge message. We just march with us. March the whole round with us. March, you and your men, y'all protect us. Protect us. Y'all march with us. March around like we just did. Do that march with us. Y'all stand beside us. No, you don't, because you the protector. So if you can't patrol yourself. If it's you that's supposed to be patrolling us, then walk with us.
I'm also protecting some of these businesses.
Okay. Okay.
Well, can you do me a favor? You do me a favor. You take a kneel. Can you take a kneel?
I don't know. They ain't enough for me.
Let me see.
They ain't enough for me.
Thank you.
They ain't enough for me.
Let me see you take a kneel. Let me see you take a kneel. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Together. Let's all do it together. Come on. Let's all do it together.
Oh, y'all in the back, take a knee. Take a knee.
If you standing up, we taking you with it. Come on, thank you.
March with us.
So before I get into what is now a historical analysis of that event 4 years after the fact, I just want to simply make some observations. Number 1, a request was made. Number 2, everyone's phones were out. Number 3, a diversion was made. Number 4, the request was left unanswered. Number 5, a diversion was made. Number 6, the protest was drowned out by a distraction. And number 7, the entire crowd was disarmed and pacified within 35 seconds. Why am I bringing this up? Why am I analyzing this event? Here's the reason. So I noticed y'all are always talking about liberalism on this app, just arguing about it back and forth about how much you hate it. And one thing I think every one of these videos is missing is an example of how it operates. What happened in that video is a real-time in 4K example of how liberalism affects a revolution. I'm going to spend the rest of this video going through each of the 7 observations and why it's really important that we notice this. Number 1, a request was made. That request was revolutionary. She literally asked of the soldiers to defend them, use their guns. She didn't say the use their guns part, but that's what she implied, or at least that's what I'm going to operate on for the analysis, that she was implying that. Now, if you want to argue that Keke Palmer's politics today and how she doesn't talk about Palestine, that's a good point. But I think for the purposes of analyzing this video, she was making a revolutionary request. Number 2, everyone's phones were out. What I think we need to understand is that, especially when we're talking about liberalism, that This event was a spectacle, and liberalism is a performance. The people that participate in the systems of our oppression know this. The regular citizens, the people who were a part of the protest, know this, and that's why they were holding their phones up. And so did the person who caused the distraction. And that gets me to number 3. A diversion was made. This person specifically changed the whole conversation and requested for these soldiers to get on their knees. Instead of protecting us with your power, your authority, your privilege, whatever, we want you to get on your knees. And I want to bring up that part about it being a spectacle. That was intentional. This was all captured and recorded. And we have to understand liberalism is always performative. And they set the stage. These phones we use set the stage for liberalism to operate and spread like propaganda. Number 4, a request was left unanswered. Because of the diversion, we never got an answer. The soldiers never said yes or no. And because of that, they have the plausible deniability of participating in this. And that's really key. Again, this is a spectacle. They know they're being watched, so they know what they can and cannot say. But the effect of this entire distraction is that they never answered. They never needed to. Number 5, a protest to the diversion was made because it's not a fucking enough, and she immediately clocked it. What the hell? Saying get on your knees to do a kneel during this time? Like, it's an actual uprising. We have to remember what was really happening 4 years ago. During an uprising, you gonna say get on your knee and kneel? That's crazy. And I don't mean that in an ableist way, but what the fuck? Now, see, Kiki better than me, because I'd have crashed out. Shut the fuck up. What are you talking about, a kneel? And back on subject, when she decided to protest and say that ain't enough, no one else could hear it. And that brings me to number 6, is that the protest was drowned out by the distraction. And an effect of liberalism is that it distracts not only people from getting on the issue at hand, which is our protection and our livelihood, but for the people that do clock it as nonsense and bullshit of liberalism. And the final point is that in the entire interaction, it only took 35 seconds for the crowd to be completely disarmed and pacified. The ideology and performance of liberalism, the performance of this symbolism of care, this symbolism of revolution, this symbolism of any kind of change to our material circumstances, a kneel, it completely changes everything, and it makes people not want to fight. In fact, it gets them on their fucking knees. And that's literally what happened. That is what happened 4 years ago. And reminder, this was an uprising. Millions of people were outside really fighting. Like, y'all, that really happened. And the reason it stopped, the reason it was cut fucking short is because of liberalism. And that's an example of it. That entire video is a clear, caught in fucking 4K example of how liberalism operates. I need us not to be like the girl who shouted that out. Because the thing is, no, I don't think she was in the CIA. No, I don't think she was planning it. I think she's just one of y'all regular ass people out here who are fucking unfortunately co-opted by liberalism. Y'all think that shit matters. You think the performance of care matters and not the actual use of power to protect us and change our material circumstances and change our oppressive circumstances. Because what Keke Palmer did, what she was willing to do, mind you, she led with love with it too. Because a lot of y'all wouldn't do it like her. Y'all wouldn't lead with love. But she did so and asked for direct use of power to protect us. That's what we need. And when we let liberalism distract us from the things that we need and instead search for symbols of our freedom and liberation, we lose in 35 seconds.
Let me show the Canadian version of this. Cops in Canada, because of the way that guns are, you can convert this into more of a spectacle because there's less of a direct encounter with force in Canada. Not to say it doesn't happen, of course it happens, but it's less of a cultural thing where police brutality, it's less overt. Canada has done a good way of siphoning all of that violence into places where the general populace can't observe it. Reserves, prisons, etc. But anyways, let's look at the Canadian version of what this fine, insightful person just explained. Because I have, as I was talking about earlier, about the way with Jagmeet Singh and the way that his political persona was crafted out of identity politics and these gestures of care. When Trudeau was willing to be this person to do all the platitudes and performances, it completely hand-tied the guy who was supposed to represent the actual left. So let's watch this and then I'll dig into it a little bit more, if just to refresh everyone's memory. I remember someone hands him a shirt. He doesn't put the shirt on. He puts the shirt on his shoulder and then he takes a knee. Chanting "Stand up to Trump."
Right, guys, are we ready to march?
Thank you for being here.
We are asking you to clean your hands off. We have a few stations with hand sanitizer, so please follow.
Okay, so here's the thing about the kneeling, right? When our prime minister does the kneeling, this gesture of care, right? This performance of care, what it does is for people who understand politics in those platitudes, in those virtues, everything in the understanding of the way in which they relate to things based on their identity. So everything in that framework, everything is reduced to the most basic, almost tribal understanding of things, where it's just like me versus them, or like you're always othering something that is like this uncivilized aspect of society. All of that is completely detached from actual material politics, like things that would actually make people's material lives better, things that would actually confront the systemic abuses of these systems. And when you have someone like Jagmeet Singh, whose entire political persona was forged through identity politics and how they are a representative of a minority. So it's like representation means progress, when that concept in itself is completely detached, once again, from a material understanding of what politics should be. It's all just platitudes in relation to one's own identity. So then when someone like Trudeau comes along and does something like this, right? In comparison, at this time, Trump was fucking smoke bombing people outside of the White House, right? At the same time, Trudeau, in contrast to him, because he's extremely fucking savvy, the Liberals are extremely savvy, goes out and does this performative gesture. Not only does it force, again, like I said, they don't need to make you support them. All they need to do is make it so that you absolutely oppose who their opposition is. And that's all they need to do. They just need to externalize the opposition enough so that it's understood who the opposition is and that you're the alternative to that opposition. And when the NDP is led by someone who, the NDP, a party that should be based in material politics, based in the dialectic of materialism, for a lack of a better term, an actual connection to one's material fucking conditions, but is led by a person whose entire political persona is forged out of just identity and incredible privilege, but still has to create this story of, when my dad was sick, I was taking care of my brothers, blah, blah, blah. I learned how to fight, like all this stuff. But it's still, yeah, but you were very rich. You grew up with, it was like you were born into money. And because of that, he doesn't represent the actual working class. But because of his identity, he was able to swindle the working class into thinking that he was a representation of it, because it was at a time when, diversity in representation meant progress, when that was all a facade that was meant to literally co-opt revolution. Co-opt, not even revolution, because I won't call it that, but co-opt any type of radical movement, any type of even subversive movement, right? Anything that's challenging the status quo. If all of your politics are being based on these platitudes of identity, then when a liberal like Trudeau comes around, and that's why what he served in that moment was, it served its purpose, because it neutralized the left during the Trump era. Like, it completely neutralized the left, so that if you were opposing Trump, you were then in alignment with the liberals. And all of that was done because of the people at the time being willing to say, oh, he's a minority, so that means that representation means progress. And if you say that he's a bad leader, you must be racist. And look at him doing all of these gestures of care. And the thing is that all of these gestures of care, look at this guy, look at him, you know what I mean? They mean nothing. It is the same as posting. Jagmeet Singh is the perfect example of it because he goes and says, this is awful, that's what's happening. If only someone could do something. And it's like, bro, you were an elected official. If anyone could do anything, it's you. But he swindles people by doing those gestures of care. But the problem is that they're not as effective when you have someone like fucking Trudeau already doing the gimmick that's all you know what to do. And Trudeau immediately, like, he can pivot to that immediately. That's what the Liberals' entire political framework was. That's what the political profile that they were selling to people at the time was, this like faux left progressivism in contrast to Trump, by neutralizing the left and by taking that ferment, by taking that energy from the left and then co-opting it and saying, this is us. You know what I mean? This is what we represent. And they're still doing it. It's happening again. It's just happening with the conditions being tinged a little bit different because it's not Trudeau. Everything has become more socioeconomic based as opposed to identity based because of the current situation with the tariffs, etc. The last thing that I wanted to say, and this is kind of a dicey take, but everything that we're talking about here and the thing that made it so that Jagmeet Singh was able to swindle fucking NDP voters and NDP supporters and people who vote NDP because of using identity politics and because of using these gestures of care, he was able to swindle people into thinking that dark faces in high places means progress when we know that it does not mean that. And the way that he was able to convince us is by these gestures of care, things like what Trudeau is doing here. Now, the thing is that that's not going to work because that like aspect of his identity is like cached, right? Because of the anti-immigrant sentiment throughout Canada, there is like an aspect of like his identity that was like understood as like, not, you can't go there. But we're in such a like post-political correct era where people are calling him slurs openly all the time. So that like thing that like where you would be canceled for saying openly racist stuff about him because of Twitter and because of all of these other things with social media has normalized it. So like that aspect, that profile that they used for Jagmeet doesn't work anymore. The thing that will work is an Indigenous man, and an Indigenous man who is doing gestures of care. And I know there was one of the missing and murdered Indigenous women who was found in the landfill recently in Manitoba. Wab Kinew spoke at her funeral and sang a song. And the thing about it is, with the most due respect, the individualized showing of respect to one person and this gesture of care towards one person, and this individualized showing of respect to one person, like this gesture of care towards one person, is anecdotal at best. And it's not a reflection of a principled leader at the current moment. The time of like vibe politics, which is what got us Jagmeet to begin with, is over. Vibe politics is over. Wab Kinew supports Israel. Wab Kinew supports NATO. Wab Kinew is not someone who is it doesn't matter what fucking race he is. It doesn't matter if he was an Indigenous man, okay? He is similar to like how the band system works, where the only way he was able to get into the position of power that he has is because of the privilege that was given to him because the structure needed that person. It is not in any way a representation of progress. It is a representation of who can we use to co-opt this system even more. Because when power is at stake, it's obvious that the most vulnerable people, the people who are most materially constrained, are going to be the ones who take it. And again, that goes all the way back to the band system. That goes all the way back to the indigenous people, the historical people with indigenous heritage who have represented their First Nations, who have been in alignment with the Crown, with the government of Canada, who are the people at the table, right? The people who are with the government of Canada fucking over other First Nations. And so you have to understand this, that there's a hierarchy apart from identity, and that we will simply make the exact same mistake that we did prior to this if we allow ourselves to get conned by another identity politics con guy. So I just wanted to go on this tangent, but goddamn, I really hope that we don't end up getting another just vapid identity politics fucking useless politician who supports Zionism and supports fucking Western imperialism and increased militarization, etc. I don't care what fucking identity they are. Okay? It does not matter, right? It does not matter. If they're for fucking sending weapons to Ukraine and sending more fucking people to the meat grinder, does that make them progressive? No. Does that make them someone who represents like the virtues of their people? No, in no way. If it represents the virtues of their people and their people being privileged people apart from their identity, just a privileged person who has power and a chance of gaining more power. That's the material framework that you need to be able to control someone and to be able to make someone not be what they want to be. Again, like Obama, like Jagmeet Singh. Anyways, I'm going off on a complete tangent here.